When we walk into a gym for the first time, we don't expect transformation in a day. We don't lift one weight and assume our body will suddenly become stronger, leaner, more capable. We understand almost instinctively that physical strength is built through repetition, through showing up again and again, through consistency that often feels boring, invisible, even pointless in the moment. Yet when it comes to the mind, we abandon this logic. We expect confidence after one motivational video. We expect resilience after one failure. We expect clarity after one moment of reflection. But the mind does not work on inspiration. It works on training. If there is one truth that psychology and philosophy agree on, it is this: repetition shapes identity. What you repeatedly think, repeatedly focus on, repeatedly tolerate becomes who you are. Just as muscles adapt to stress through consistent stimulus, the brain rewires itself through consistent patterns of thought and behavior. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity. Philosophy calls it habit. But in simple terms, it means this: your mind becomes what you practice. Every day, whether you realize it or not, you are training your mind. When you avoid discomfort, you train it to escape. When you complain, you train it to see problems. When you compare, you train it to feel inadequate. And on the other hand, when you stay calm under pressure, you train resilience. When you focus despite distraction, you train discipline. When you reframe failure, you train strength. Mental toughness is not an inborn trait. It is not reserved for a special category of people. It is not something that arrives when life becomes easier. It is the result of deliberate, repeated practice, much like physical endurance. Think about the first time someone tries to run after years of inactivity. The body resists, it burns, it wants to stop. The mind whispers, this is too much. Now consider how similar this feels when you try to stay patient in frustration, focused in chaos, hopeful in uncertainty. The emotional discomfort is just as real as physical strain. And like physical strain, the instinct is to quit. This is where consistency becomes power. You don't build a strong mind in moments of crisis. You build it in ordinary days, in the quiet decisions no one sees, in choosing not to react immediately, in choosing discipline over impulse, in choosing growth over comfort. As someone like Muniba Mazari often embodies through her outlook, strength is less about dramatic breakthroughs and more about steady inner alignment, the ability to meet life with intention rather than reaction. Mental training lives in small acts, choosing to wake up with purpose instead of scrolling endlessly, choosing to finish what you started even when motivation fades, choosing to challenge negative self-talk instead of accepting it as truth. These are your mental repetitions. And just like in physical training, progress is invisible before it becomes undeniable. There is a long phase where nothing seems to change, where discipline feels unrewarded, where calm feels unnoticed, where patience feels pointless. But beneath the surface, something is happening. Your emotional tolerance is expanding. Your attention span is strengthening. Your reactions are slowing down. Your perspective is widening. You are becoming less controlled by circumstances and more guided by choice. This is the difference between reacting and responding, between being shaped by the world and shaping your experience of it. Consistency also removes the illusion of motivation. In the gym, you don't rely on feeling inspired to show up. You rely on structure, on routine, on commitment. The same must be true for the mind. You cannot wait to feel positive before thinking constructively. You cannot wait to feel confident before acting courageously. You cannot wait to feel ready before taking responsibility. Action trains feeling, not the other way around. And over time, the mind begins to trust itself. Just as the body learns that it can lift more, run longer, endure deeper strain, the mind learns that it can handle discomfort without collapsing. Confidence then is not a sudden emotion. It is the memory of surviving your own consistency. When you repeatedly choose discipline over distraction, growth over ease, reflection over reaction, you are not just solving problems. You are redesigning the architecture of your thinking. You are becoming someone who does not break at the first sign of resistance. And that is the essence of mental strength, not intensity, but continuity. Because in the end, the mind does not rise to the level of your ambitions, it falls to the level of your habits. Train it daily, or it will default automatically. Once you begin to understand that consistency trains the mind, another truth becomes unavoidable. Growth does not come from ease. It comes from resistance. In the physical world, this is obvious. Muscles grow when they are challenged beyond their current capacity. Without resistance, there is no adaptation. Without strain, there is no strength. Yet, psychologically, we often try to build strong minds while avoiding discomfort. We want confidence without rejection, resilience without failure, clarity without confusion. We want peace without ever facing chaos. but the mind evolves under pressure in the same way the body does. Philosophically speaking, resistance is not an obstacle to growth, it is the mechanism of growth. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. Modern psychology confirms it today. Adversity forces cognitive restructuring. It demands emotional regulation. It invites perspective. And in doing so, it expands our mental capacity. Every challenge you face is a form of psychological weight, a demanding conversation, a moment of uncertainty, a failure that bruises your identity, a delay that tests your patience. These are not interruptions to your development, they are the training itself. The problem is not that we encounter resistance. The problem is that we misinterpret it. We see discomfort and assume something is wrong. We see struggle and assume we are weak. We see failure and assume we are incapable. But resistance is not evidence of inadequacy. It is evidence of engagement. Think about what happens when you avoid difficulty. You protect your comfort, yes, but you also preserve your limitations. You remain emotionally untested, cognitively rigid, behaviorally cautious. Avoidance feels safe in the moment, but over time it shrinks your world. It teaches the mind to retreat instead of adapt. On the other hand, when you face resistance, even imperfectly, something shifts. You begin to develop tolerance for uncertainty. You realize that discomfort is survivable. You learn that fear is not always a signal to stop, sometimes it is a signal to grow. As Muniba Mazari often communicates through her lived experience, adversity does not merely break us or build us, it reveals us. It exposes our patterns, our assumptions, our hidden strength. Resistance shows you where your mind is still untrained. It shows you where impatience lies, where insecurity hides, where control is an illusion. And that revelation is not punishment, it is opportunity. Psychologically, when we confront challenges rather than escape them, we engage in what is known as stress inoculation. Each exposure increases our ability to handle future strain. The first rejection feels devastating, the 10th becomes manageable, the 100th becomes instructive. This is not because life becomes easier. It is because you become more adaptive. The same way lifting heavier weights strengthens muscle fibers, carrying heavier emotional loads strengthens psychological flexibility. You become less reactive, more reflective, less threatened by uncertainty, more capable of navigating complexity. Resistance also forces humility. It dismantles the illusion that control is guaranteed. It reminds us that outcomes are uncertain, that effort does not always equal reward, that progress is nonlinear. And in this dismantling, it offers something far more valuable than comfort, wisdom. When you struggle, you are invited to ask deeper questions. Not just how do I succeed, but who am I becoming through this process? Because ultimately, resistance is not shaping your circumstances, it is shaping your character. It teaches patience when results are delayed. It teaches courage when outcomes are unclear. It teaches perseverance when motivation disappears. Without resistance, these qualities remain theoretical. They sound admirable but never become embodied. And perhaps most importantly, resistance breaks the illusion that strength means ease. Strength does not mean the absence of pressure. It means the ability to remain grounded within it. When you stop fearing resistance, you stop fearing growth. Challenges become less like threats and more like training sessions. Failure becomes feedback. Discomfort becomes data. You begin to see life not as something happening to you, but as something working on you. And that shift is transformative. Because once you understand that resistance is not your enemy, you stop wasting energy trying to eliminate it and start using it. In the end, the weight you carry today is preparing you for the life you are trying to build tomorrow. Embrace it or remain unprepared. If consistency trains the mind and resistance strengthens it, then there is another layer we cannot ignore. What you feed your mind determines the direction in which that strength develops. Because strength without direction can be destructive. Just as the body reflects what it consumes, the mind reflects what it absorbs. And in today's world, consumption is no longer limited to food. We consume ideas, narratives, conversations, images, and information constantly. Through screens, through environments, through relationships, through self-talk, every input leaves a psychological trace. The brain does not filter truth from repetition as carefully as we like to believe. It internalizes what it encounters frequently. Thoughts repeated become beliefs. Beliefs repeated become perspectives. Perspectives repeated become identity. This means that your mental environment is not neutral. It is shaping you, whether intentionally or accidentally. Consider how easily negativity becomes normalized. Spend enough time around cynicism and hope begins to feel naive. Spend enough time around comparison and contentment begins to feel like stagnation. Spend enough time consuming fear-driven narratives, and the world begins to feel hostile. This is not weakness. It is conditioning. The mind adapts to its diet. In psychology, this is known as cognitive priming. Exposure to certain ideas influences how we interpret reality. Feed the mind with scarcity and it will scan for lack. Feed it with threat and it will scan for danger. Feed it with inadequacy and it will scan for flaws. And the tragedy is that many people invest hours in strengthening their bodies, but leave their minds exposed to intellectual and emotional junk. Imagine training physically every day only to nourish your body with harmful substances. The effort would be undone by the intake. The same applies mentally. You cannot build resilience while constantly consuming defeatist narratives. You cannot cultivate focus while feeding your attention with distraction. You cannot develop self-worth while immersing yourself in comparison. As Muniba Mazari often demonstrates through her perspective, mindset is not built in isolation from influence. It is nurtured through conscious selection of what we allow to shape our inner world. This does not mean living in denial of reality. It means engaging with reality intentionally. Your mental diet includes what you read, what you watch, what you listen to, but perhaps most importantly, what you say to yourself. Self-talk is the most intimate form of mental consumption. When you repeatedly tell yourself, "I'm not ready," you train hesitation. When you repeatedly think this is unfair, you train resentment. When you repeatedly believe, "I'm not capable," you train limitation. And just as harmful external content can weaken mental clarity, harmful internal dialogue can distort perception. But the reverse is also true. When you expose your mind to constructive ideas, reflective conversations, and meaningful challenges, you expand its capacity. When you choose learning over scrolling, reflection over reaction, curiosity over judgment, you nourish psychological growth. This is not about forced positivity. It is about balanced strength. A healthy mental diet includes discomfort but not despair. It includes critique but not self-destruction. It includes realism but not hopelessness. It equips the mind to interpret difficulty without internalizing defeat. Philosophically, this aligns with the idea that perception is not passive, it is cultivated. We do not merely see the world as it is, we see it as we are conditioned to see it, which means your inputs shape your interpretations. A person exposed to empowering ideas does not live without problems, but interprets them differently. A setback becomes information. A delay becomes preparation. A challenge becomes engagement. Meanwhile, a mind fed with constant negativity interprets the same events as confirmation of failure, injustice, or futility. Same. Reality, different perception, and perception determines action. When you protect your mental diet, you are not escaping the world, you are strengthening your capacity to engage with it wisely. You begin to ask, is this input helping me grow? Is this conversation expanding my thinking? Is this habit strengthening my clarity? Over time, this intentional consumption creates stability. You become less reactive to noise, less influenced by fleeting trends, less dependent on external validation. Your thinking becomes anchored, and an anchored mind is not easily shaken. Because in the end, the quality of your thoughts is shaped by the quality of what you consume. Feed your mind carelessly, and it will weaken silently. Feed it consciously, and it will strengthen intentionally. Choose wisely, because your future is digesting what you consume today.